lied to me, they shot at me, they hate on me, they're dead to me, and now Kirblog's my enemy. Yeah, that's right. Put Electro Sweet as a list of Kirblog opening theme song jingles. Welcome. Mayrvel continues with Spoderman Week. Hope you all enjoyed my long-winded and very fun discussion with my guest Xander Mobus, who was on with me last time, as we talked for well over an hour and a half about how much we love the Spoderman. I also want to say real quick, I totally forgot to mention this. I actually owe Xander a lot for those of you who are fans of the Did You Know voice acting spin-off unofficial Did You Know gaming series about voiceover. Xander actually was a big, massive help with the trio of Marvel-themed character ones that I did a while ago. I'll have a link to that in case you haven't checked those out, because now with, maybe a lot more information that you have on some of these characters from the movies, you might find some more appreciation in the work that went into those. He was a major help on that, so big thanks to Xander. Sorry, I forgot to mention that before. So welcome. This time is going to be a little different. I'm doing this one by myself, and I mentioned this a little bit. And in fact, actually, I will say ahead of time, just to cover everything, I will probably be repeating a lot of information that I said in the hour and a half long Spider-Man discussion. So check that out if you haven't already seen it. But yeah, this one is going to be about my personal experience with the Spider-Man movies. And because, and I guess I didn't really imply this as much, maybe because I didn't really want to admit it, but the truth of the matter is, I think the grand majority of my actual exposure to Spider-Man is because of the movies, which is funny because they're not my favorite piece of media regarding the character or his whole, universe and everything. But I kind of owe them a lot. And so before this, what I did was, and I actually want to give a little bit of a plug here because they're kind of a big part as to, what kind of factors into my remembering things and also some of my opinions. I'm going to say, if you haven't been following Nostalgia Critic's work on the Channel Awesome website or YouTube page or whatever, for more of the funny side of things, I referenced the top 11 silliest moments in the Ramy Spider-Man trilogy, and also more appropriately for this conversation, the old versus new Amazing Spider-Man versus the Ramy trilogy video, which I kind of very quickly was like, just watch the video. That's basically my opinion. And mostly it is, but there's also a lot of stuff specifically that I want to talk about in terms of my own thoughts on the movies. So I will start with the Ramy trilogy, because again, that was my first major exposure to the character and everything that came with him. It's funny because this comparison to me is kind of similar. When I rewatched Doug's video about this again, it kind of reminds me of certain things about the comparison between Fullmetal Alchemist and then FMA Brotherhood, where I still meet a lot of people who actually do prefer the first series of that because of the animation quality and the music and everything. Even though Brotherhood was, I think, overall executed better than the first series, I still enjoy bits and pieces of the original FMA for what it is, and Brotherhood, I think, is a little bit more faithful to the actual comic material. And granted, neither movie series are totally faithful. They take a lot of their own liberties, not necessarily in bad ways, but I'll start with the Ramy trilogy first. In terms of good points, definitely a lot of great action scenes. Spidey versus Doc Ock on the building and with the train and everything, both of those all throughout 2 was a major highlight of that movie. In fact, I would even go so far to say, too, Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, which I think Xander and I definitely gave high praise to, was one of the best things about, if not the best thing overall about the Ramy trilogy, was just his performance. And even though, you could argue, the tentacles, having their own personalities or whatever, was a little freaky, and even some of his performance was a little cheesy, but it was definitely a lot stronger than how over the top and ridiculous a lot of the other ones were. And that said, though, I even looked it up and watched it again semi-recently. The Spidey versus Sandman, Venom, and Neo Goblin, basically all at once, and then Neo Goblin ends up helping him out and it being Harry and everything. At the end of Spider-Man 3, despite that movie being just fucking ridiculous, that action scene at the end is still pretty cool. All the while I'm just like, God, just Venom, why are you so skinny? But yeah, that aside. Also, in addition to Alfred Molina, another major highlight, J.K. Simmons. I mean, he truly, to me, is the perfect J. Jonah Jameson, and I don't know who or if anyone else will be playing him in Spider-Man Homecoming, eventually, because they skipped over him entirely in the Amazing movies. And also, for the record, that's not to say that the other actors are bad. Like, I have nothing against, like, Tobey Maguire or Kristen Dunst or anything. I think that they did fine. I think it's more so just the overall direction and, like, the creative side of, like, the decisions made, like, in how these movies were formed, that I'm just like, I look back on them and, like, and it's weird because I thought, like, I have good memories of seeing them in theaters with friends, but I can't really... Oh, no, actually, yes, I do. I recall when I went to go see Spider-Man 3 in high school, I saw with a whole big group of friends, and there was a little girl there sitting behind, I think it was a little girl, who just, like, every, 2 seconds was just screaming, Spider-Man, 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 Spider-Man. So that's a funny memory, not necessarily a, happy memory, I guess, but I think that maybe that was the only one that I saw with my friends, because I can't recall if I did that with... the first two. I probably did, and I just can't remember because it's been so fucking long ago. I can't believe it's been 15 years since the first one came out. It's insane to me. Also, last good thing, just Bonesaw in general. R.I.P. Macho Man Randy Savage. Bad things, yeah, just hokey-ass acting. I just didn't really do it for me. And I know that, I rewatched The Amazing Spider-Man 2 last night, and, it's got some cheesy moments too, but overall, I could just take them more seriously than, how everybody was in all three of the Raimi movies. The romance was a just massive pain in my asshole. I just couldn't, I couldn't tolerate, how it was going all the way throughout. And then 3 was just, that was one of the big kickers, more or less. In fact, actually, I would even say that the annoying romance in the third movie was more aggravating to me than, the imbalance with the villains, or just the poor use of Venom and blah, 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 all that stuff, Even back then, too, I really do wish, I said this a little bit before, too, but I wish that Venom was not in 3 at all. I know that in retrospect, that's whatever, they didn't end up doing any more of them past that point anyway, but, I wish that Sandman was the main focus villain of 3, and then with, Neo Goblin being surprise, but again, it doesn't really matter in the long run, so it's okay, well, at least we got a live-action little glimpse of Venom, and it was kind of cool for all 10 minutes, I guess, but, Moving on to the Amazing movies, though, much cooler action scenes to me, personally. I, again, could take them a little bit more seriously, and they were just, really well choreographed, and one thing that isn't necessarily the fault of the Raimi movies is that now the CGI is much, much, much better. The effects cover up the fact that, it's clearly not always them there, in fact, very often isn't. Spidey versus Lizard in the sewer was a great one in the first one, and then in 2, both Spidey versus Electro in the city. I like that actually more than him versus Electro and the power plant thing. But Spidey versus Goblin in the ending fight, for obvious reasons, as we went over about Gwen's fate and how that culminates, was pretty awesome. I dug Garfield as both Spidey and Peter. Even if he was a little too cool for him, because again, that's the biggest thing I always hear is I couldn't believe Andrew Garfield as Peter because he was too cool or whatever. And this, okay, again, Xander and I definitely agreed on this. No matter what, it's a fucking Hollywood movie. They're always going to get good looking actors to play all these parts, even the geeky characters. That's just the way it fucking is. But honestly, I liked Garfield Spidey's eccentricity and goofiness and weirdness and everything. I bought that as a more contemporary kind of geek, and not a simpering, whiny, annoying geek the way that Tobey Maguire was directed. Because Tobey Maguire's performance like that works great in Pleasantville, something like that. But for just, even without knowing anything about Peter Parker, it just made me not really like the character that much until I saw other incarnations of him in general, aside from that version of him in the Raimi movies. But yeah, no, I really liked his performance a lot, especially going back and watching it again. Also dug the shit out of his dynamic with Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy. I don't know if she's ever been like that in any of the comics. Obviously in the Spectacular series, she was treated more like a nerdette, as they often joked as her. I don't know if she's ever been, like that, either the way that she is in the Amazing movies, or if she's been the way she was in Spectacular Spider-Man either. In any of the comics, I'm assuming at some point, I'm sure that some writer eventually was hey, let's write the girl characters to not be, shallow, love interests, of the weak or of the year or whatever type characters or anything, but definitely her portrayal and just the two of them together were just fucking adorable. Nostalgia Critic said that, ad nauseum, so he covered that. On that note too, though, critics' point about the Raimi trilogy's villains being like more memorable and like iconic is totally fair. Like, I can still objectively look at the Amazing versions, and I feel like I still like them better. And granted, they were using different characters, but just the general execution of them. Because especially since the Spider-Man villains are iconic because they already were before they existed, as interesting characters, presumably in the comics, and not because of the movie interpretations or the actors that portrayed them. So as much as I love Alfred Molina's Doc Ock, and like I have some fond memories of like, I like bits and pieces of Thomas Hayden Church's Sandman and Willem Dafoe's Goblin and everything. Like, I can still objectively look at, okay, but as films and just using them in the context of the story, I like the Amazing's interpretations of them, and also much better use of them. And particularly what I was excited about when I was looking forward to seeing Amazing Spider-Man 2 when it was first coming out in theaters. Is I was going in thinking, okay, this is probably going to be a much better use of the three villains all in one movie, especially compared to Spider-Man 3, where basically Venom was forced in, by Sony. And I know a lot of people still argue against that, and I can't really refute that, but I don't know. I can understand why people don't like Electro, because he's a little wonky at points with the way that they wrote him, but I don't know. I thought he was genuinely, like, terrifying. Like, he is one of the most, like, intimidating in a very different kind of way, in that he's like so unpredictably like insane, and also looks terrifying. Like the fucking eyes that he has when he becomes like the blue skin version later. Jamie Foxx, I think, is a great actor. And then, but I can understand. But Rhino gets too much unfair shit. Oh, he's so undeveloped. It's like he doesn't have to have development. He's a device for like representing Peter's development throughout the movie. Like, he serves as the opening and the ending. The opening is Spider-Man in his prime, and he's like, fully like, on board and good at what he does and really on top of his shit. And then the ending of the movie is when he's like, okay, I have to come back from my depression that I'm slinking into, and I have to, try to fight on and remember what Gwen taught me and the great things that she said and everything. And then I got to go back in and do what it is that I'm best at and everything. And Rhino is basically used as like a set piece for that. And that's fine. That's a perfectly like okay use of a character, because in a way, Jesus Christ. Bonesaw is in the Civil War movie, except he's not, God rest his soul. Bone Crusher, excuse me. In the beginning of Civil War was used in a very, very similar kind of way. And I haven't seen anybody argue, oh man, Bone Crusher was so fucking, or not Bone Crusher, what the fuck am I saying? Crossbones. Okay, good. 2 tries and then I fucking get the character's name right. He was serving that same kind of purpose in the beginning of Civil War, and I didn't really see anybody complain about his lack of development or whatever. So I don't know. I mean, that's just me. But yeah, and then also surprisingly relatable version of Harry. I found it interesting that they made him Goblin instead of Norman this time, and also just not being afraid to make him look like the fucking character from the comic, and not making him a stupid like Power Ranger knockoff villain or whatever, like the way he was in the first fucking Raimi movie with Norman and everything. I can't remember that actor's name, but the guy who played Harry, I thought like did a good job. Like, it was an intriguing kind of story. It had enough. I felt it had enough room to breathe and everything. I don't know. I wasn't put off by any of the things that people were complaining about with Amazing 2. And part of me gets worried, like, do I just have bad taste? Am I a fucking idiot? I don't know. But like, I watched it again last night, and it's like, it's an enjoyable movie. I like the story. I felt it was well paced out. It had good use of all the characters and everything. It had a tragic fucking, and like, the climax with a great ending, that even with that being the last one, because my last thing, was Gwen is a, I mentioned, I was going on and on about how great of a character she was, but spoilers, so turn back now while you still can. She dies genuinely helping Spider-Man save literally the entire fucking city. And, in a fight against an enemy who is kind of stronger than any of the ones from the Raimi trilogy. I know that, like, in other stories and other interpretations, Venom and Sandman are feasibly more powerful in different ways, and maybe even Goblin is too. But that iteration of Electro in Amazing 2 was, like, potentially one of the most dangerous I've ever seen in any of the live-action interpretations so far. and even Lizard to some extent before that. But yeah, the fact that she was so genuinely helpful and tried and died trying that was amazing to me, and that's the biggest like takeaway I took from just all 2 of those movies before that series was canceled. Yeah, and then the other thing I was going to say was some of the unnecessary edits and cuts made from most of the first movie. I'm not entirely sure what the deal was with like how much they edited out the last second or whatever. They covered a lot of the things about Peter's dad in the second one that made for a satisfying conclusion to that anyway. And I was also hoping that Mary Jane would have been kept around in Amazing 2, just to like, similar kind of gripe with the Venom and Sandman thing in 3. It doesn't really matter much in hindsight because they're not doing any more of them anyway. But I would say even then, like Amazing 2 works for me as a better finale to that pair of movies than Spider-Man 3 did for the Raimi trilogy. That's that's just entirely me. And then I guess the only other gripe I can really agree with is that some of the dialogue was a little weird. Like once in a while it'd be very like, oh yeah, that's totally how people talk. But there was so much good stuff, especially between like Peter and Gwen, that it just overpowered all of the other stuff for me. Like by and large, it was a lot just way overall better, realistic wise with the dialogue than the Raimi trilogy was. So I don't know. That's entirely me. I'm very curious about, not to skip to the end already, but I'm really curious about what people's thoughts are on that, because I'm meeting more people now who I think are a little more like, yeah, no, the Amazing movies I liked better. But I meet so many people that defend the Raimi trilogy as being a better set of movies than the Amazing one. So I don't know. That's just me. But the other thing is, despite all these not being, exactly, amazing or spectacular or any, they're in Spider-Man description word, they're still, again, like I said at the beginning, they're the biggest amount of exposure to the franchise that I ever had in general. And they were enough to make me a fan of the character and all the other interpretations by proxy. I mean, Spider-Man as a character ended up being a way bigger influence on, kind of what I want to do with actually something like Balancing Act, for instance, more than I even predicted. And especially now that I've just recently, at the time that I'm recording this, I've just finished watching all the way through the Spectacular Spider-Man series. And I'm now like, I'm upset for one thing, but that'll be a separate subject in and of itself. But yeah, but that said, like now with how like invested I am in the character because of that grounding I have from the original movies and then even the more recent Amazing ones, I'm excited so hard for Homecoming. Xander and I talked a lot about this and everything, and just just to repeat a little bit of it, what I'm really looking forward to is the fact that this is going to be completely different as far as I'm concerned from any other Spider-Man 1 we've ever had, from the old one that I've never seen from like the 60s or whatever, from the Raimi version, from the Andrew Garfield Amazing version or whatever. Homecoming is going to be a totally different kind of movie because of the fact that in this universe, again, there are other superheroes that Peter looks up to, whereas in the other interpretations, as far as I know, there aren't any, where we never got to meet any other ones. So, and Spidey being an impressionable kid with 2 different pillar role models like Iron Man and Captain America is going to make in and of itself a really, really intriguing movie. And it could be just as much of like, the way that, some of these movies are like the way that Civil War I described as almost like Iron Man 4 in a way, or maybe even the Avengers could be like Iron Man 4 and 5 and 6 or whatever the fuck you want to, decipher them as. These are just as much probably going to be Iron Man and Captain America movies in some way for developing those characters alongside Peter. I also think I decided after the conversation I had with Xander, I think the villain that I really want, if it were up to me, is I'm kind of hoping for a Chameleon. One, because, again, as far as I have read, I believe he is the first Spider-Man villain, even before Tinker or the Green Goblin or anybody like that. And also, I feel like because he doesn't have like crazy supernatural powers, like life-threatening powers, he'd be a much more manageable villain. And would could maybe just make for a little bit more of like a human story in terms of Peter trying to figure shit out and some of the turmoil that he has to go through and everything. That's my personal preference, but I'm totally open to a bigger character if it works out well. I think that Homecoming is coming out next year, maybe around like summer, I believe. So I mean it's going to be a long wait, but then again, Civil War was a much quicker wait than I originally thought it was, and then I blinked and it fucking came out. So who knows? But it's definitely going to be interesting. I do really feel, despite all my gripes and ranting and raving, I really do owe a lot of, why I enjoy Spidey and just the whole, universe that he exists in, even without the Avengers and all the other major Marvel characters and everything. I owe a lot of that to my seeing the Raimi trilogy for, all my complaints about it and etc. So, and I enjoy the Amazing movies for what they are. I enjoyed watching Amazing Spider-Man 2 the other night before I recorded this. And so that's going to wrap this one up. So I hope you enjoyed. I'll reveal now, finally, the next Spider-Man Kirblog, which I'm going to extend a little bit further past the single week, is going to be a spectacular Spider-Man focused Kirblog that I'll be joined by Ben Diskin, the voice of Eddie Brock and Venom by extension from that series, to talk about that. He's catching up and watching some episodes to remind himself because it's been almost a decade since he recorded the show. But that's going to be a lot of fun. And then after that, we'll be going into, I guess, not so much an Avengers week as much as it'll be a Avengers weekend, and I'll have more information about that very soon. But yeah, look forward to that, and that's going to do it. So in the comments below, leave your thoughts and hopes, dreams, memories, anything about the Spider-Man movies. Do you like the Raimi trilogy more? Do you like the Amazing ones more? Do you think that neither of them necessarily got it right? And on that note, are you excited more about what Homecoming's going to do to fix a lot of those things, or do way better? What are you hoping for? What's a new Spider-Man villain that's never been done in a movie before that you want to see in the future movie? Favorite moments or villains or anything from the movies that you can remember? Any particular performances or anything like that? Anything at all? Let me know. That'll do it. And if you have suggestions for future Kirblog topics, Marvel related or otherwise, leave a comment about that too, or hit me up on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook. The usual. That is it. I will catch you all on the web.